Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Bharati Vidya Bhavan IKSL, Higher Education Forum, MRL, and other allied institutions, we extend a very hearty welcome to all of you for the monthly IKS talk. And today, the talk is going to be a very important and relevant topic, and that's the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. And to talk on this topic of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, which is our a part of our ancient wisdom of self-realization, we have with us Dr. Swapnaleka Basak, a very eminent personality. She is basically engineer, turned into an HR consultant, worked in corporate sector for a long, long time in very senior positions. And she has a very deep interest in the entire Indian knowledge system. She has also started her own NGO, which is called Sthir. That's the name under which she is actually appearing on the mobile today also. That's it for the purpose of the building the mental well-being of the people. So, on behalf of all of you, I thank Dr. Sapnalaka profusely and request her to take it over. Dr. Sapnalaka, floor is open to you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I have to say, I have to thank you for this privilege because every time that one has to prepare to speak about it actually becomes a process of renewed learning for me also. So thank you for this opportunity. So thank you so much to all of you for having joined in for discussing one of our, as Dr. Sen Gupta says, one of our very ancient texts, which is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It would be very helpful if all of you could just drop into the chat box if you have read about it, if you have read it, do you practice it, so that I have kind of an idea about where all of us are together on this. I am very well aware that you've been having your IKS talks, and we are all very well introduced to the idea of all the Mahavakya that we have. So we understand what the purpose of life cognitively is. So let's explore how Rishi Patanjali's Yoga Sutras actually help us get there, because that's what the beauty of the entire text is. So I've just put together a slide pack because it's a difficult text. I've put together something so that I could share with you so that, so is that visible? Is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
It's visible now. Okay, great. Okay, so where do we start from? So as I said that last time, I remembered the last IKS talk that you had was where you all discussed the Abhangs, I remember. And we had this understanding and conversation about Aham Brahmasmi and that we are all a part of the universe. So I thought I'll take off from there. So in our text, it says Yat Vinde Tat Brahmande. And what it means is, as is there in the microcosm, it's there in the macrocosm also. And now physics has also proven it, that everything is actually energy. When the frequency is different, it's perceived as matter. When it is different, it's perceived as something more subtle like space or air. The question that we have with us is that if in case cognitively understand that, then where is the problem? And the problem lies in the fact that we do not really live our lives as if this fact is known to us or that we know about it, isn't it? Do we live our lives with this cognition that we are a part of this universe, and is that the way we actually behave? We don't. So yoga is actually a method for us to actually reach there. One of the things which I always asked myself is that if I'm in a state of yoga, what does it actually mean? We all talk about it, right? That we have to become one with the divine, we have to become one with the universal consciousness. What does it actually mean to us to be in that state? And is it even possible? Because last time I remember there was also a question which came that if in case I become spiritual, would it mean that I let go of life in its usual sense? So I just want to mention to you two people and who are there in our. So one is Raja Janak. We all of us know about Raja Janak, who was Devi Sita's father, the ruler of Mithila. and student for Yagyavalkya. And we knew that he was what our texts call Raj Rishi. That means he was a Raja as well as he was a Rishi. So it does not mean that if in case you are a Rishi, it means that you have to let go of life and live something differently, like atop a mountain or inside a cave. That's not what the case is. So there's one story about Raja Janak, and I'll just tell you in 2-3 sentences that once a very wise sage sent his son Shukadev to Raja Janak, saying that if you want to really understand what self-realization is all about, you should go and visit Raja Janak. So this, his son and student, was himself a very profound Vedic scholar, and he thought, what is a king even going to tell me about self-realization? So he went in with a lot of attitude, telling Raja Janak that my father sent me apparently to learn something from you, which I don't know till now. So Raja Janak spotted where the youth was coming from, and he said, do one thing. I'll give you a pot of oil which you have to keep on your head. Take a round of this entire city of Mithila without dropping a single drop of oil, because if you do, you know that my soldier standing behind you is going to chop your head off. Do that, come back, and then we'll talk about it. So obviously you could imagine when he went into the city and he went around, his attention was absolutely focused on not dropping a single drop of oil from that pot. And he successfully came back. So the Raja Janak asked him, so how was your experience? He said, yeah, I saw your city, but people asked me questions, I answered them. But I was very conscious that I didn't have to drop the oil, and I didn't. So he says, this is the way that I actually rule my kingdom and lead my life. My attention is always there, that I'm a part of the divine. I'm a part of the universal consciousness. But when I when I live my life, all my actions are informed by that thought. And I do nothing different from the others. But since it's informed by that thought, I'm therefore able to rule better. I'm able to study better. I'm a better practitioner of all Vedic principles which are there. So that is why we say that Raja Janak was what we called a Jivan Mukta. That means as he was living in that state, also he was free. So what does free mean? Free means whatever he did was a choice for him. He never did anything because it was a compulsion, that there was something inside him which reacted. Every decision that he took for the kingdom, every step that he took came from a space of choice. So therefore, being in a state of yoga means being in a state where you're hitched on. And that is why, you know, the root word for yoga is yuja, which means either to join or to latch on to that universal consciousness. So in our, you know how our philosophy is, it gives space for everything. So if you think that the divine is separate from you, then we look at yoga as addition. If you think that you're a part of divine, but you keep on going away from him, then we look at it as that you have to hitch yourself to that universal consciousness and act from that space. So that was Raja Janak. And in our own tradition of kings that we've had in this country and queens that we've had in this country, there's another king called Raja Bhoj. You must have all heard about him. Raja Bhoj and the Singhasan Battisi, we all know about it, how he actually succeeded Vikramaditya, and he was such a wise and he was a very known ruler. Raja Bhoj has actually written 84 books on different aspects of Indian knowledge and system. He was a king, but he was also a yogi. So why I'm saying all of this is often we think that being a yogi means being away from regular life. The Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are a wonderful text for telling us how to be a yogi in your and ours everyday, day-to-day life. So that is what it has. So now, if in case being always one with this divine consciousness, how do we get there is a question, right? Everybody now, you've told us it's nice, but how do we get there? So there are many methods by which we can actually get to that place. And what is that method? So we just discussed that there are, from our body to the entire universe, everything has got Panch Mahabhut, right? There's earth, there is water, there is fire, there is air, and then there is space. Earth is grosser than water, water is grosser than fire, fire is grosser than air, air is grosser than space. And we are all constituted of the Panchamahabhut. And in our system, in Indian knowledge system, we always say that we have to move from the gross to the subtle. Now, we are all different human beings, and Ayurveda says that our composition as people is all different and unique, depending on the ratio of all these elements that we have. So therefore, our knowledge system gives us a variety of ways to actually reach that universal consciousness. So what are those ways? So we have the body, we have just a moment. So we have the body. Subtler than the body is our breath, isn't it? And subtler than the breath is our mind. So if in case we want to use our body to reach that ultimate consciousness and yoga through that, that is called Hatha Yoga. So when we usually talk about yoga, what you hear, what you think about are all yogasanas, right? We think that yogasanas are actually yoga. Yogasanas are the bodies, it's using the body to reach and become one with the divine. When we do that, that is called Hatha Yoga. And let me also just tell you, what does Hatha Yoga? Would anybody know what Hatha means in Hatha Yoga? Oh, this is very interesting.
I can attempt. I think her and tha, they refer to the two, the left and the right nadi, something to do with our.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So Hat means the Surya Nadi, and Her means the Surya Nadi, and Tha means the Chandra Nadi. For those of us who don't understand it, let me just quickly tell you. The energy body in our energy body actually extends 18 inches from our body, which means this is our gross body, right? This is the head, and then this is the gross body. I can touch it, I can feel it, it has a shape and form. But we also have an energy body. You've heard about auras, people talk about auras. This is basically the energy that I'm emitting as a person, that also has a layer around it. And that is actually, that extends 18 inches from where my body ends. Now, how is that aura created? That aura is energy. And why is there, how is that emanating? Because inside our body, we have a network of 72,000 nadis, which are connected all over to make the person that we are. And through the nadi flows electricity. Thoughts are formed. And when electricity flows, then around every nadi, there will be an electromagnetic field which will get created. Right? So our bodies are actually like, what should I say, an electrical device. So around our bodies also there's energy going around. Now, where is this energy emanating from? All the nadis within our body. So like how we've got highways and then we've got other roads, the two trunk highways of the nadis in our body are called Ida and Pingala. So Ida is the Tha that I spoke of, and Her is the Pingala. And we say that when these, so whenever we are in our everyday life, energy flows more from one of the two, either from the Pingala or from the Ida. We say that we get into a state of yoga when energy flows through the central nadi, which is called Sushumna. So when the two energies from the two separate nadis join in and flow through the Sushumna, then we say we are in a state of yoga. And in order to do that, what are the things we do? We do asana, we do pranayam, we use mudras, and we use bandhas. All these systems are used to actually get the energy to flow through the Sushumna Nadi. In fact, all yoga will run. So this is the path. Hatha Yoga is the path to actually make that happen. Is that the only path? No, we've got other path also. So then we have the path of Karma Yoga, which the Bhagavad Gita talks about so much. So what is Karma Yoga then? So Karma Yoga then has two things. It says that you do Yagyartha Karma. That means you do action like you are offering it to a Yagya. And whatever you get from it, you take it like Prasad Buddhi. Those are the aspects. So if you follow those two, then also you are in a state of yoga. Then comes to Bhakti Yoga. You heard about the talk on the Abhangs last time. It was Bhakti Yoga. The name Bhakti only tells you what it is. Bhakt is the opposite of Vibhakt. Vibhakt means divided. Bhakt means not divided. So when you are in the state that I'm always one with my Ishta or God, you are in a state of yoga. So that is Bhakti Yoga. Then you have Jnana Yoga. When Jnana Yoga is when you follow the path of inquiry and knowledge. So who am I? If my name would not be Swapnalekha, would it not be the same person? No. So my name is not me. My body, is this me? No, can't be, because when I was young, I was 14 kgs. Today, I'm so much. So it's changing. So it can't be me. So contemplating on those questions, like who is that person who knows that I slept well when I get up in the morning? Because I don't know. Who's that person who knows? So those are all questions that you contemplate on, you think about it. So Raman Maharshi that you've heard about, he came from that space, that you have to continuously contemplate. That is Jnana Yoga. Now comes when we use our mind and meditation, the study of our mind as a method to actually get into that space of oneness with the divine. That space is called Raj Yoga, and the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras deal with Raj Yoga. Would we have any questions here? I'd love to, if in case there are any questions, please feel free to, I'll take logical. Okay, so we'll move ahead from here now. So therefore,
I had a
Patanjali-
question. Which is the easiest of them all?
No, all of them are equally easy. It depends on the kind of a temperament that you have.
Okay, and what we are getting more inclined towards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Naturally.
But at the end of it, and I will tell you also, and that's the last bit, I'll save it, that Raj Yoga has a little qualification before you start off with, and then we'll come to that at the end of the session. So, so this is what the Yoga Sutras are all about. So who wrote the Yoga Sutras? Rishi Patanjali wrote the Yoga Sutras. So we therefore need to know who Rishi Patanjali is. So now when you think about Rishi Patanjali, the first thing which comes to your mind is always, before every session that you do in yoga, do you always not chant this? Always. Yogena chittasya padena vacha, right? We always. Now just look in, everything about Rishi Patanjali is there in this. Yogena chittasya, so that which brings quietness to the mind, which is the Yoga Sutras. So Rishi Patanjali wrote that. Grammar that elicits effective speech, padena vacha. So he also wrote a bhashya on Panini's grammar. So and then malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena. So that means, and the healing art, so the Ayurveda. So he also has written on the Charak Samhita, he's also written a commentary on that. So it is said that he was there somewhere around 2nd century BC. But when we speak about Yoga and Yoga Sutra, we say that Rishi Patanjali did not invent it, or he was not the first to propound it. This knowledge had been there with us for ages. He has, to his credit, codifying this entire knowledge into just crisp 196 sutras for us to understand what this is all about. And you remember I mentioned to you why I mentioned Raja Bhoj is this small prayer that we do has actually been written by Raja Bhoj in his Bhoja Vritti, which was again a commentary and a bhashya on the Yoga Sutra. So this prayer that we spoke of, Yogena Chittase. This appears in Raja Bhoj's work, which is Raj Martanda, or it is also known as Bhojavritti, which is why I mentioned at that time Raja Bhoj and King Janak. So this is about Rishi Patanjali. There's a lot of conversation and discussion about whether he was the same person who wrote all the three things. But to us in Indian knowledge systems, it doesn't matter, because what matters is the knowledge that we have in our hands, and it really doesn't matter what. So we said that we are going to talk about the mind, because Raj Yoga is all about the mind. So I just thought that I'll share with you a 3-minute clip on what this means. So this is, I've picked it up. This is Dr. Ram Manohar, and he's an authority on Ayurveda, especially when it comes to the understanding of the body, mind, consciousness connect. So just listen into, he talks about what mind actually is, and tell me, give me a thumbs up if in case you can hear the sound.
What is mind? Mind is very elusive because you cannot see it. We can only infer its existence. So even Ayurveda has asked this question: is there really a mind? And it's very difficult to study the mind because the mind is like an interface between the body and the self. So you cannot study it without referring to the body or to the self. So it's not that it is not existent, but you cannot separate the mind. You cannot take the mind out of a person, put it on the microscope and see what's going on, like you take a cell, because in the cell also you see the shadow of the mind. Whatever you take from the body, you see the shadow of the mind, because it is part of the same continuum. You cannot separate it. So if you pull any part of your body, the mind also comes along. And so most of the time when you study the mind, you're actually studying the body. And that is why in modern science they say the mind is only an epiphenomenon of the body. But that's not true. It's because it's one continuum that you mistake it to be a product of your mind, but it is not. And on the other side, if you focus more on your mind, then you can see what is beyond the mind, it's consciousness. And once the mind hooks to the consciousness, then you have another experience. And in the Indian tradition, in the Ayurvedic tradition, this is the big difference in strategy. Today we try to study the mind through the body. So all techniques, you fit an electroencephalogram, see what's happening in your brain, or you do all these kind of, other physiological parameters, tests to see what's going on inside the mind. But in the ancient system, they made a very critical decision. They said that through the body, we can see only the shadow of the mind. If you want to capture the mind, hook the mind to yourself. And then only you can study the mind. And that is why, instead of psychology, it became the study of consciousness. Study of consciousness means the study of the mind hooked to your consciousness. And what is there in Ayurveda about the mind is all about the insights gained through this approach. Not by looking at the mind from the body, but by looking at the mind through the perspective of your own consciousness.
So when he says that we have been looking at the mind from the lens of the body, what it actually means is the kind of conversations which are happening are all around the brain these days. So we are talking about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all that. We are saying how things are happening inside the brain. When a thought arises, what actually gets triggered off. But the question as to why the thought is arising is not being tackled. And that is where probably the genius of our texts lie, because they go down to the root cause of why things are happening the way they are. So let's just move on and now look at how is the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So the Yoga Sutras have 196 sutras organized into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is called Samadhipad, second one is called Sadhanapad, the third one is called Vibhutipad, and the fourth one is called Kaivalyapad. So Samadhipad describes it gives you actually technically all the theory, all that is what is the truth which is known, for you to understand how is it that we can reach to a state of yoga. The second sadhana path actually has all the doables in it. So the famed Ashtanga Yoga that we know of, the Kriya Yoga that we know of, that is housed inside the second, which is the sadhana path. Three limbs of the Ashtanga Yoga spill into the Vibhuti path because they are supposed to be Antaranga Yoga. That means they are the higher levels of yoga. And the Vibhuti path speaks about all the siddhis that you attain. That means in the magical qualities that yogis get as a result of practicing what has been prescribed within the sadhana and the in the samadhi and the sadhana path. Now, all of us, you will know you have these flashes of awareness at times, right? When there's an idea which happens or there's a thought which occurs and it's like it's a eureka moment which happens. That is actually a state where you've just touched the universal consciousness and drawn in some of its power into you. But in order for that state, for one to stay in that state for a long time is a very, very big challenge. And it has been a challenge for all rishis that we've had and our sages also. So the Kaivalya path speaks about that, where you get completely into that space. To give you an example, when we are learning to drive a car, in the beginning there is conscious incompetence. You don't know that you can drive a car, right? But after that, somebody tells you this is the way you to do it. So you become consciously competent then. So the first, the second and third is you're consciously competent. And the Kaivalya path is when you're unconsciously competent. You don't have to try anything. You just become like that. So for all of us, mere mortals who are trying to actually keep our mind as focused as possible, the first and the second paths, which is the samadhi and the sadhana paths, are of main interest to us. So let's start what is there first in the samadhi path. So we've got very little time, but I thought I'll generally just give you an idea because my purpose is that you should all get inspired to start exploring the Yoga Sutras for yourself, because this is like a lifetime journey and very enriching. So the samadhi path first starts with defining what is yoga. And we all of us know, right? What does it say? It says yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Now, what does that mean? So first we need to understand what is chitta. So chitta is the surface. And since we don't have time, we'll keep it as broad as possible. Chitta is that surface in our mind on which all impressions get created, and we make sense of the world by looking at it through our chitta. Right? So you can imagine it like a glass which is there. If the glass is absolutely clean and anything coming onto it, it doesn't even move, then you have reached a level where you can look at truth the way it is, just the way it is. Have I been able to make it clear? What is chitta? So I'll give you an analogy which Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda used to say, chitta is like the lake. Right? When the lake is absolutely quiet, no ripples, and the lake is absolutely clear, you can see the bottom of the lake, right? Similarly, when the chitta is absolutely clear, you are able to see everything as clearly as is possible. When you're talking to somebody, you would know exactly what is going on in that person's mind. When there's a situation unraveling all around you, you will be absolutely aware on all the things which are affecting it. You don't get swerved in one direction. That is what. So chitta is that surface. Now, what does vritti means? Imagine there is a rubber surface. So there's a ball, which is one event happened. Somebody came and said, oh, you're looking very sick today. It came and hit your chitta, right? Now it's made an impression. What the hell? Is that a thing to say early in the morning to me? Now, what has that done? That impression came and it got made on the chitta. If in case you were chitta vritti nirodha, the impression would come on the rubber thing and it will again take state. No, for a while you'll feel bad. Again, it goes into the same state. So when that state comes, that your chitta is unaffected by anything coming and hitting on it, you have reached the level of chitta vritti nirodha. That means any vritti coming onto the chitta has stopped mattering to you at all. Today, that's not quite the case. Everything which comes sits on it. And then when we look at people through that same lens, we have a colored impression. We behave in a manner which is not right, which is what we have to. So the whole journey is, how do I make my chitta so clean? So therefore you will see chitta shuddhi people talk of, right? Chitta shuddhi, when you're sitting and listening to satsang also is chitta shuddhi. Because what is happening now when we are talking, these are all good things coming and sitting and making impressions on it, right? So all these good things, now when you're looking at life, you look at life with those impressions, which are the right ones. So this is Yoga Chitta Vritti. So this is the final ultimate goal of yoga. I'll let that sink in. Right? So the Samadhi path first starts with saying, now let me just make it a little easy for us as to what does really mean. So in Shankaracharya in his Bhashya wrote that our Chitta Bhumi, that means the floor of the Chitta, is of 5 kinds. So we will understand where we are, because it's a gradation to go into that state of Niruddha. So the first one says is Moodha. Moodha Mati, those who heard Bhajagovindam would know. Moodha means doesn't move also. That means you're sitting in front of the TV or one thing is coming, scrolling. Mind is also not there. You're not liking also what you're doing, but you don't have any energy to get up and change that at all. So that is the Moodha state. A little better than that is what is called the Shipta. Shipta means, in English, we can call it like a monkey mind. Going here, then there, then here, and there. Now, you picked up the phone to send somebody a message saying that, get this done. But as soon as you go and open your WhatsApp, you find there are 3 other messages. You go on to that message. One of the messages is a reel. You go on to that reel. That reel takes you to Instagram or wherever, YouTube Shorts. And then you're watching one after. That is what the monkey mind. It's not staying in one place at all. The next beta is called the Vikshipta mind, which is a butterfly. So what does a butterfly do? Flutters, goes and sits somewhere, sits for a little while, then again goes and sits somewhere. And then comes the next, which is the Ekagra. Ekagra means this thing of flow. Like, for example, right now I'm speaking. All that I'm doing is just thinking about this, speaking and connecting. This is a state of Ekagrata. You're only thinking about that. But in this also, there might be a time I'm looking at somebody's face and saying, oh, it looks like that person is not liking what I'm saying. That's a parallel thought going on. What has happened? I've moved from Ekagra back into Vikshipta. So that Ekagra state also to maintain is a challenge. And from Ekagra comes to the next, where you are in complete awareness without the need to be doing or concentrating on one thing. You're just being, and by being, you are in a state of complete awareness, and that is called Niruddha. And that is the final state, that Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, when we say this is the final state. In that state, you will see that there's a lotus which is made in the picture, which means that our Sahasrara chakra is supposed to be a lotus. And when that Sahasrara chakra opens, what it means is that my energy body has connected with the universal body. And now I can actually, it's just like the internet. You see, the internet is a very powerful analogy. What do? We just go and hook onto the internet. Then whatever we want comes, right? We're just putting questions and it's coming. It is that state that our rishis were. So that's why when the Vedas were written, it's called Apaurushaya. No person wrote it. So they were in a state where they were hooked on to that universal consciousness, and that knowledge and awareness just flowed through them. So this is Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. That's what it means. Now let's, so this entire Yoga Sutra is a guidance to move from the state that we are in to the next. I just thought that I'll bring this up right now because we spoke about Ekagrata. And because of all the technology that we're being exposed to, do you know that in 2013, I don't know what it is now right now, in 2013, it has come that our span of attention is even lower than that of a goldfish. You remember we scolded our children saying that, where's your attention? Don't behave like a goldfish. Today, humanity's attention is that of a goldfish, which means that we can't stay looking at one thing, thinking about one thing, even for 9 seconds. So therefore, this is the time when Rishi Patanjali's wisdom is required for us. Okay, so let's see how does the Samadhi path. So the Samadhi first tells you what is yoga. Then it tells you what is the purpose of yoga. Then it says Tada Drashtu Avasthe Avasthanam. So what it means is that in that state of yoga, you are stated only in your person and your dhyan is nowhere else. Then the question is that why is it not always like this? So then the Yoga Sutra says it's because of the vrittis. You remember we discussed the vrittis? Because everything is coming and making impressions in our mind, and we start getting away from our real mind because of that. Then it tells you there are 5 kinds of vrittis. It tells you that there is praman, viparya, and so on and so forth. I'll not bore you with that. There are 5 kinds of vrittis. Each of those vrittis you will see creates an impression on our mind of 2 kinds. That vritti can give us joy, it can give us sadness. For example, anybody opening their wedding album, some people are happy, some people are sad. So the same thing can cause someone joy and then can cause somebody sadness. So the purpose in the Yoga Sutra is that first remove all the klisht vrittis, those which hurt you. After that, remove all the aklisht vrittis also. Then your chitta is absolutely clean. That is the path. So how do you do it? Then the next question is, you've told me these are the vrittis, 5 kinds of vrittis. How do I remove it? So then the prescription which Rishi Patanjali gives is you have to do 2 things. You have to practice and you have to practice detachment, abhyas and vairagya. Those people who, those of you who read the Bhagavad Gita, the 6th chapter has it in the Dhyana Yoga section where Lord Krishna says that you need to have abhyas and vairagya. So I just wanted to share with you now how does Rishi Patanjali define abhyas? And this is just so that you get interested in to go and read the other bits also. So abhyas, Rishi Patanjali says that it has to have 3 things in it. Then only will your abhyas become perfect of anything that you do. First, he said it has to be done for a dirgha kal. That means it has to be done for a very long period of time. Now we've seen all, whether it is a Lata Mangeshkar or a Sachin Tendulkar, or we read Malcolm Gladwell talking about, how practice blink when he wrote, he said 10,000 times if you do something, then you become perfect at it. So imagine you have to continue to do it for a long time. So first is for a long time. The second is regularity, which is nairantarya. That means you have to do it. So it can't happen that you've done 5 days and then 2 days, whatever it might be. Huh? We are not talking, just not meditation, anything. And the third it has is that it has to be done with a very nice, good bhava. So when people are dieting and they are sad about it, it will never happen. Rishi Patanjali will reject it as any practice because he says if you're not doing it with a good bhava, then it is not abhyas. So all of us, whatever you're trying to do in life, remember these are 3 things needed for my abhyas to become sthit. That's what he says, that if you want it to become drida abhyas, then you need these 3 things. So he tells you this is abhyas, then he tells you what is vairagya. He also tells you what are the different kinds of vairagya. So we've reached now 1.12 to 1.7. Then, now that you know abhyas and vairag, he tells you that there are different levels of sadhaks. So when you read it, you come to know where am I? And to move ahead, what is it that I have to do? So there are levels of sadhak he has defined. Then he has spoken about how Om is the word of the universal consciousness and how practicing it can actually lead us to a state of yoga. So the Samadhi path has 6 sutras devoted to that. Then it talks that you will do all these things, but whenever you're doing sadhana, there'll always be obstacles. And then he speaks about obstacles. So which are the obstacles? He's lined out these 9 obstacles which come in every sadhak's way. What are those obstacles? You can read that there's illness, which is vyadhi. Then there is laziness, doubt, carelessness, sloth, and there are words for this. So now just think about it. Vyadhi, if in case your body is not fit, you will not be able to do anything. If you have a persistent back pain, what will you do? Mental laziness is syan. Sanshay is doubt. In our Indian knowledge systems, sanshay is one of the most dangerous things to have because it takes away the whole feeling of Shraddha away from you. And when Shraddha is not there, anything that you do will not give you the results that it ought to. Then pramad, this careless and negligence. Alasya is laziness. Avirati. Avirati means getting attached to sensual things. It could be food, it could be some form of entertainment, it could be anything like that. So when you read the Yoga Sutra, it actually gives you a 9-cell model to check with you which are my obstacles and how do I actually get over them. Because these obstacles will come in every person's way. One of them, which is called as Bhranti Darshan. Bhranti means false, Darshan means a view of life. Have you seen that there are so many logical arguments for us to do wrong things which are floating around these days? That we get into this, and if we want to convince ourselves to not do something, we have enough intelligence and information to prove to ourselves that this is not the right thing to do. For example, people saying I'm a morning person, evening person. Lots of people say these days that I'm a evening person. What you're actually saying is that you are unable to get up in the morning. That is no personality. You are unable to do it. But you have built your own logic in your head because there is enough information on the internet to prove to you it's absolutely fine to actually sleep late. I'll give you an example that on the internet, you can also find information which will tell you that the construct of your eye is faulty. Our eyes are designed to look far away and not near, but our life is designed to look everything nearby. So some wise person has actually put a paper on how the construct of our eye itself is wrong. So Bhranti Darshan means convincing ourselves with things which are actually wrong and using our brains to rationalize things which are wrong to believe in. So those are the obstacles. After he's dealt with the obstacles, then he gives few techniques on actually what are the ways in which one can stay happy. They are called Chitta Prasad. Prasad means happiness. Chitta means our man. So what is the way to actually be happy? There are some techniques which are there given over there. And the chapter, the first one ends by saying what are the types of samadhi? Because as I told you, samadhi is one final state which has also steps in it. So then it defines. So samadhi path. So this is what the samadhi path is all about. Now the samadhi path has given you all the theory and everything. Now you get on to work with the sadhan path. So what does the sadhan path say? The first one talks about Kriya Yoga. It says Tapa Swadhyay Ishwar Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. That means tap means tapasya. Then Swadhyay, we'll just discuss what Swadhyay means, study actually, study of the self. And Ishwar Pranidhan means what you discussed in your last talk is Bhakti. Ishwar Pranidhan is total surrenderance to the universal consciousness. When you do practice these three things, you do what is called Kriya Yoga. So the next question is, what happens if you practice Kriya Yoga? So Rishi Patanjali says, if you practice Kriya Yoga, your klesh will come down. Now, what is klesh? We heard vritti right now, right? So vritti is all the impressions which come on and then we respond to that. Klesh is as a result of those vrittis, all the dirt which gets deposited forever and we start thinking wrong, those are kleshas. So let's just, somebody would ask, which are the kleshas that we have? The first one he says is avidya. So what does avidya mean? Avidya means thinking that which is impermanent to be permanent. For example, our own life. All of us live as if we are never going to die. We think that which is good, we think that is bad. Think what is bad, we think it is good. That's all a part of avidya. Then asmita. Asmita means this egoism that I am separate from others. That is asmita. You must have all heard about rag and dvesh. Rag means something good has happened. You want more of it. Dvesh, something bad has happened. You're like, that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. And more often than not, if you fear something, it comes true. And the last is abhinivesh, means clinging to life, meaning a strong desire to live and not believing that we are all actually not bodies. We are all souls, or we are all jivatmas which have come to this world with this body, and that jivatma stays on. That thing is never there. So these are the kleshas. So Rishi Patanjali says, if you practice Kriya Yoga, what are those three things? Tap, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhan. These kleshas will go down. What else? Then he says, after you worked on that, then he gives us what he calls the Ashtang Yoga. And the Ashtang Yoga talks about those 8 limbs of Ashtang, right? So let's talk about what are those Ashtang Yoga. You have Yam, Niyam, Asan, Pranayam, Pratyahar, Dharana, Dhyana, and final Samadhi. So I've put 7, the final is Samadhi. What are these? He's laid out a full path for you to reach the level of samadhi, one by one. Many of you might know, but I'll still, at the cost of being repetitive, I'll still. So yam are certain principles that he has given, certain things we should not be doing when we are engaging with the world. So the 5 yams are ahimsa, and ahimsa he calls a mahavrat. What does that mean? Vrat over here doesn't mean upavas. Vrat means dhrida sankalpa. That means deciding on doing something very firmly. So Rishi Patanjali says, if you practice ahimsa, don't bother about the rest. Everything will happen. Just practice ahimsa. But obviously he knew that we aren't that bright to follow him. So he's given 4. So he said satya, which means speaking the truth. And speaking the truth means what? Saying what you believe in and doing what you're saying. Both the things, that's satya. And ahimsa would mean at 3. See, in our Indian knowledge system, there's always 3 karma. So we talk about action, words, and thoughts. Manasa, vacha, and then karmana. At 3 levels you have to. So ahimsa at all 3 levels. Manasa, vacha, karmana. Then satya, asteya means non-stealing, and it's a little weird, so we'll explore what it really means. It basically not taking anything which doesn't belong to you. Talk about the environment and what we are doing. Brahmacharya means always, charya means movement. Brahma means this whole universe. So staying in sync with the universe is what brahmacharya doesn't essentially mean celibacy. And then you have aparigraha means not hoarding or keeping something beyond what you require. So that is yam. Should we discuss about one yam? I just thought that which is very important these days. We spoke about asteya, which means non-stealing. Now, it doesn't mean you go and steal from somebody something. We don't steal, right? We all feel we don't steal. We are very moralistically upright people. So when we have a job and we don't give 100% to what we are doing and somebody's paying us a salary, we are actually practicing stealing. Suppose there are 5 people talking and you have interjected somebody while you are talking. You have actually stolen the space which another person needed to voice his self. You've taken that away from him. That is also stealing. When you take the credit for something which you have not done, that is stealing. When you look at somebody else doing something and copy it and pass it off as yours, which everybody is doing on the internet these days, that is stealing. You've given somebody time to meet at a certain time and you show up 10 minutes late, that is stealing. So you see, asteya has, so when we're reading the Yoga Sutras, these are insights which will come to us. The more we read, we're dealing with life and say, oh my God, oh, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done this. So why? Because when you practice asteya, then you remember the vrittis that we were speaking of? No negative vritti will come and actually create any klesh in your chitta. And that's what the whole purpose is. So the idea of yam niyam is not any moral principles. It is for our own good only. You practice yam niyam and you'll make sure that your chitta stays as clean as is possible. So if you want to become somebody ekagra, focused, if you want to become better in your everyday, daily transactions, interactions with people, you have to follow yam. Now let's come to niyam. So then he has, so yam is dealing with the external world. Niyam is something that you do with yourself. So the 5 niyams that Rishi Patanjali has given is Shauch, Santosh, or Tapas, Swadhyay, and Ishwar Pranidhan. You remember in Kriya Yoga, we had taken the last 3. Tap, Swadhyay, Ishwar Pranidhan. He had given that. So what it means is that if you have to start with something, start with Tap, Swadhyay, and Ishwar Pranidhan. So what does Shauch mean? Cleanliness. Again, cleanliness of all body, mind, everything. So we have Hajar frameworks in our Indian knowledge system. You must have heard about the Shadripu or the Arishad Varg. Kama, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. Those are dirts of the mind. So when we work on that, we are actually doing Shauch. Then you come to Santosh, is about contentment, being happy with where we are and what we are. What is our self-talk? I'm okay with what I have. Then tap actually, so when we say tap means anything which burns these wrong vrittis and kleshas that you have inside you is actually tapas. Any practice that you do. Then swadhyay, and I've taken that one to talk about is, lots of people think self-study is swadhyay. Swadhyay means study of the self, by the self, for the self. So how do you study these days? There are books, there are podcasts, there are YouTube videos. So suppose you want to understand the Yoga Sutras, you will find a series of videos by people explaining. My only one thing, which my thing would be that do not go and listen to somebody like me who's talking about it in an academic manner. Listen to somebody who's a self-realized person, that you think that this person has actually figured it out. That's something which my teachers have told me and I have always passed it. So academic understanding is okay to understand it from somebody like me. But if you have to dwell on it, think about it, then do your own reading and listen to people who are actually been there, done that. So that is about Swadhyaya. So these are Yam Niyam. Two things have happened. Now let's go. What is the third? Third is the Asana. Now, everybody thinks yoga is about asana. Can you guess how many sutras out of 194 are about the asana? Anybody wants to take a guess? It's in single digits. So there are only 3 sutras on asana. And the first one says, Sthiram, Sthir Sukham Asanam. Sthir means steady, Sukh means in a happy state, that is asana. So Rishi Patanjali doesn't want you to do calisthenics and roll yourself into all kinds of difficult postures if you find it difficult. He does not consider that as asana for Raj Yoga. And then he goes on and says that when you are performing asana, this is the way you should do it. And the rest will not dwell about that. So there are only 3 sutras on asana that the Yoga Sutras have. What is the fourth now? We've done Yam, Niyam, Asana. Now we come to Pranayam. I just spoke to you about the Nadi system a little while back. The energy in our body, which flows in that entire network, the carrier for that is our breath. So let me just explain to you. We do not die when we stop breathing. We die when the life force leaves us. So there are yogis who do not breathe for long periods of time because they have learned that skill, because their prana is still there. So now you see we are moving from first behavior with the external world, Yam Niyam. Asana is now I've taken my body. Now I've come to pranaya, I'm working with my breath. So the Yoga Sutras has certain things that it talks about, what breath does and does to you, and since we do not have time, we'll not dwell on it. The final thing is Keval Kumbhak is that part when you stop almost breathing and you still exist. So that's pranayam. Then comes pratyahar. Pratyahar means withdrawing all your senses within. And the analogy that our scriptures use, I shouldn't say scriptures, like our shastras use, is that of the tortoise or the turtle. What does the turtle do? It rolls all its hands and feet inside and just goes like this, right? I just wanted to give you a Puranic reference so that you know all of this is connected. We know about the Samudra Manthan. At the Samudra Manthan, who was the base of the Manthan? Was the Kurma avatar of Vishnu. Right? Kurma is the turtle. It is the base on which the Mandar Parvat was there. The Mandar Parvat is our spine. And then you had the Asurs on one side and the Suras on one side. So these are the vrittis which are going. So they are churning on the left and right side. And then the energy flows up and what comes out is finally the Amrit. So you see that Puranic story also talks about how Pratyahar forms the basis of Dhyan, Dharana, Dhyana and Samadhi. So in the story also, the story of the Samudra Manthan is actually a manthan of our mind, metaphorically. So these are stories that we tell so that we get into that frame of mind and then we start thinking about it and then it occurs to us. So the Mandar Parvat is the spine. The Kurma Avatar is the base, our habit Pratyahar, which is holding it. And at the end of the churn, which is our sadhana, what we get is the Amrit. So this is Pratyahar. Now at Pratyahar, the Samadhi path ends. And then we move into the Vibhuti path, which is the third. So the Vibhuti path then talks about Dharana, Dhyan, and Samadhi in 3 simple sutras because they are more about experience and doing anything. So we've moved into the Vibhuti path. The first, second, and third sutra have told us the last 3 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga. Now, what is the rest of the Vibhuti path then? You remember I told you Vibhuti means extra powers that you get. So the first 3.45 talks about the siddhis. Those of you who've done Hanuman Chalisa, you know, we say Ashta Siddhi, no Nidhi ke Data. Those Ashta Siddhis is all these siddhis come to you through the practice of yoga. So what are these siddhis? These are 6. And if in case you look at Hanumanji himself, you will see that how he used all this. You remember how he became like a small bee? So he used the first one, Anima. Then how he expanded his body when he met Sursa, that is Laghima. Then he became heavy, nobody could lift him, that is Garima. So these are all the siddhis, and Hanumanji was supposed to be a siddhi yogi. So these are the Ashta Siddhis that it talks about. Now, what are the other siddhis? All these talks about, these are the different kind of siddhis that you will get with the practice of yoga. Now, what happens is, even when I speak to very young people, they get all very excited about this. But Rishi Patanjali tells us is the most dangerous part of your sadhana. Because what happens is when you get these siddhis, it goes to your head. You start thinking that you've achieved something larger than life. You start dealing with people like that. You develop ego over there, and there you go down the we know where. So therefore, siddhis are great. It comes to you, but they should not become the destination. Now, I would also want to tell you something, that the yam niyams that we spoke of, the 5 yams and 5 niyams, Rishi Patanjali in the earlier chapters have told us that if we practice those yam niyam also, we'll get siddhi. Let me give you an example. If you practice ahimsa, he says that those who practice ahimsa, those who, if somebody comes to meet a person like this, he will let go of his vaira. That means vaira tyaga. That means he'll let go of the hinsa inside him. And believe me, I've had an experience that I was once in the vicinity of Anna Hazare for 2 days, staying in the same complex. There was some work we were doing in Ralegaon City, and I was very agitated the first day when I was there. And believe me, I really felt as if just being in the company, listening to him only made my, angst about something that I have just go away. So I think that I kind of experienced it firsthand. So that's about ahimsa. Satya, if you always speak the truth and do what you say, then the next time whatever you say will come true. That is the siddhi that you will get. Asteya, they say if you practice asteya, then you will get all the jewels of the world. And when I say jewels, doesn't mean material jewels. Anything that you want will come your way if you practice asteya. If you practice brahmacharya, your vitality of your life will go up. And if you practice aparigraha, you will remember your past and your future. You'll know what will happen in your past and your future. So even doing the yam niyam can actually give you so much siddhis that you don't have to wait till doing the maximum. So we could start doing with that only. Okay, so this is about the Vibhuti path. And I can see we've got just 2 minutes to go. And I'm glad that I've reached here. Now, the Vibhuti path is the only one which is of interest to us till now, because Samadhi path, the Kaivalya path talks about levels where I haven't reached, none of us have probably reached, so we shouldn't bother too much about it. But still, I'll give you a little brief about what are the kind of things which are there, which is interesting. Like the first one says that, often people reach that level of siddhi and some level of samadhi also because of Janma means from your past life you've got. You will see sometimes very riffraff people also have some kind of siddhis, and you wonder, how did they have it? That's because they've got it from their past life. Aushadhi, that means hallucinatory drugs can also give you small levels of that feeling, but it will not stay there. Then mantra jap can take you there. So it talks about how, it talks about a level of siddhi which is beyond what normal all of us practice and get. So that's about Kaivalya path. Now, I just wanted to, I couldn't stop myself from doing this. There are so many new things which are happening in the world today, as if there are new things. So there is this thing in Hawaii which started, which called Ho'oponopono. I don't know whether you heard it or not. That idea actually comes from Chitta Prasad and Chitta Shuddhi from the Yoga Sutras. So I'll just leave this here, what I want to tell you. every possible method of getting control of the mind exists inside the Yoga Sutras. So that's why I say this is an old wine, people are putting it in new bottles and dishing it out. Any one sutra of the Yoga Sutra, so if one picks up and just absorbs it in one's life, you would have actually achieved it. So that's what the Yoga Sutras are in, as short a time as I could share with you. So the next question is what? And then somebody asked me, I think it was Anupama who asked me that question, which is most difficult. So I just want to mention this to you, that, many scriptures in our, it's like the Brahma Sutra, the Nyaya Sutra, they all start with some kind of an invocation mantra. Like this one for Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it says Atha Yoga Anushasan. Atha Yoga Anushasan. That's what it starts with. Atha means now. And Yoga, and then it says Anushasan. It is the only text in our entire Indian knowledge system which speaks about Anushasan in its first line. All others spoke, like the Brahma Sutra says, Athato Brahma Jigyasa, which Gautam Rishi wrote. The Nyaya Sutra, it says, Atha Tattva Jigyasa Nyaya. So they say that this is the curiosity of the Brahman or the larger consciousness that we are exploring. But it's only in the Yoga Sutra that it says, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. So I think what's the most important thing and takeaway from here is the first opening sutras of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra that now starts the discipline of yoga. And Raja Yoga without any discipline cannot get us anywhere. So this is so these are the next steps for you. If any of you would want to explore, I know there enough which is there. These are some of the commentaries that I like, and you could, so the 4 chapters of freedom are by Swami Satyanand Saraswati from the Bihar School of Yoga. Osho has written a very good commentary, especially it's very conversational. It has some amount of irreverence like Osho usually has, and it argues the case very well. And then you have Swami Hariharananda. I don't know whether they are in print now or not. And then you have Swami Vivekananda's Yoga Sutras. So this is all, this is short summary of what the Yoga Sutras are all about. And I'm happy to take any questions if you have. Any questions? Thank you, Prakash ji. And my numbers are there on the group. Anybody wanting to reach out, if you would want to study, I'll be just happy to share how I've been doing and what I've been doing.
Anybody has got any question, please?
One question.
Yes,
Please.
sir.
Why is it that we practice in the first, say, 15, 20 years, and then we forget about these Yoga Sutras, and then there's a discontinuation, and then we restart it? So what is the perfect way of this? We say the regularity or whatever. I mean, sometimes it doesn't, it's not possible to do meditation. But it happens automatically without doing much rituals. Is it okay for that, for senior citizen?
I think, sir, pehli baat, jabhi jago tabhi savera. It is never too late for any of us to start doing anything. I think that's a very, very important thing for us to know. Second is, I think, as I told you, Anushasan bada zaruri hai. To say that it happens when it happens might not be, Rishi Patanjali might not agree with that. He would say that you have to do abhyas and vairagya. Abhyas would mean regularly kariye, और vairagya कोई expectation मत रखिए कि उससे होगा क्या. You just do it because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly. Okay. Very good. Well answered. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful session.
Thank you, sir.
I was just wondering about, like, there are so many distractions today and mind is running all over the place. So some practical tips for us to look inward, that's getting to be very difficult.
Okay. So I think the first, you remember the part I spoke about abhyas?
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 rules. Make a note of that. First is Dirghakal, you have to do it for a long period of time. Nairantare, you have to do it every day. And you have to do it with good bhav, right? So decide something. Say that I will 5 minutes every day, close my eyes and just follow my breath. 5 minutes kar sakte ho na roz.
Yeah.
Bas, ho gaya na. Start with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very good answer.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, Nirodha seems a bit unachievable for us.
If you start with that feeling that it's unachievable, you will not. Believe that it is, because so many others have done it. Why can't you?
Is it Samadhi somewhere similar to Samadhi?
You know what? These are all, I will often remember Vivek Debroy for that. These are all cognitive conversations, ना प्रियदर्शनी? अभी तक तो हम एक स्टेप भी नहीं लिया है, हम समाधि के बारे में सोच रहे हैं. Take the first step. Take the first step. समाधि भी आएगी फिर.
No, ma'am. I'll come back to you with our research. That's fine. Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Any other question?
Sir,
Prakash Parab?
yeah, I just want to find out, the Raja Yoga is okay. So should we do concurrently the Jnana and the Karma and Bhakti, or we can
Very
reach
good.
those? Yeah.
Very, very good question. Thank you, sir, so much for asking that question. See, it is not possible for us to do any one kinds always. You can't sit in meditation throughout the day, right? So we live our lives, the entire day goes through in different kinds of methods to reach that same destination. So right now we are all thinking about it. This is Jnana Yoga happening. When you do your actions with the Yagyartha Karma and Prasad Buddhi, that's Karma Yoga happening. You do 15 minutes of meditation every day, that is Raj Yoga happening. You sit and listen to Kirtan, you discuss, do Satsang, that is Bhakti Yoga happening. Our life has to be in a yogic state always, sir. Always. So therefore, if Bhakti is that which works with you, do more of Bhakti. If Gyan more works for you, do more of Gyan. But throughout the day, your every step in life should be doing one of these yogas. That's what I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Any last question, anybody? Anything? I think if there is no other question, I think it was an excellent session, Dr. Swapnalekha.
Thank you so much, sir.
Too much said in too less of a time, but the essence
I
remains.
know.
But the
I
essence
know
remains.
I'm guilty of that fact, but I just wanted to give a little flavor so that you get all tempted to go and read and find out more about it.
But it was
So-
a very, very deep insight. Thank you very much. Look
Thank
forward
you
to
so
more.
much. Sure. Namaste, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Very interesting session. We all enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Enjoyed. I want,
Yeah. Yes, you were asking something. Somebody was asking something.
yeah. I'm Uma Sharma. I was just asking in this, food also matters now, nowadays.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ahar yoga is also a yoga, ma'am.
Yeah.
So when you're eating food which is sattvic, that is yogic ahar. So that's why everything in life has to be yogic for us to get there.
Yes.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Thank you so much. Really, it was a really very, very nice, but a very kathin hai. It is not so easy to just practice tomorrow onwards.
No.
Yeah. Difficult.
Anytime anybody wanting to get onto it, just reach out to me. My life is to the cause of spreading the Yoga Sutras, because I think that's such a need of times right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
We need first, regular practice. And
Make a group and start practicing. And I told you 5 minutes should be your target. Then it becomes achievable.
It's like Chota charge and booster charge. Very good.
Thank you, ma'am.